Hey everybody, Britton here. Welcome back to another tournament game analysis video. Today we're going to be covering round 2 of the Hamilton Summer Open. I am playing against Jonath. I drew my first game, so I'm hoping to come back with a win. Let's see if I can. I'm playing with the white pieces again. Let's see how it goes. I play e4. Jonath plays e5, knight f3, knight c6, and bishop e5. So, just another normal Ruy Lopez. We see a6, bishop a4, and then knight f6. So, there's two moves here, d3 and castles. I ended up playing d3. So the idea is, if one remembers, I played a game a while ago against Emma Hay, where I castled and then she took on e4, and I realized I had no preparation there. So I'd rather play a quieter, slower move like d3, just so they can't take on e4, and then slowly just build up, and eventually just play c3, d4. It's slow, but it's still effective. We see b5, bishop to b3, and bishop to c5 now. So I castle, d6. And here I play c3 pretty quickly. I think one thing I was worried about is if I play h3, which I don't know why I didn't. This is totally fine to prevent bishop g4. I didn't know if I'd see anything like this, like queen d7, and then, or like rook g8 with g5, g4. This is highlighted well from Aronian versus Kramnik. And I think it was the 2018 candidates. But I don't really think that was going to happen if I played h3 here. I don't think they're really primed in order to castle long. And I think I can open the center in time if they try to do something like this. So I can punish them. Yeah, so I allow bishop g4. And generally, this isn't the biggest concern anyways. Queen d7, knight bd2, h6, and then knight f1. Because I can play h3 and knight g3. So let's just say they castle. h3. Taking on h3 just does not work, period. Queen takes h3. There's this important move, knight h2. Everything's covered. g3 is covered. f3 is covered. I'm going to play queen f3 next move. And also knight g4 isn't playable either. So the second I play queen f3, they're going to have to move their queen back, and there's no more attack. They're just down a piece for 2 pawns, which is just not enough in a position like this. And white should probably be winning already. Alright, so g5 was played instead. They were really going for it. I played bishop e3. We saw knight h5. And now I decided to play h3, and I was really trying to test them to see if they were going to take. Because I didn't really believe in it if they tried taking here. Because if they did, again, I would be looking at a move like knight h2. The knight on f3 to h2. Because this opens up my queen to the defense. Either I'm going to f3 or to g4. And then I'll kick their queen out. So that was my idea here. They took on f3 instead. And then played knight f4. So here I was unsure of what to do. I decided to take on f4. And then, which is actually fine. But then I followed up incorrectly. I played queen g4. And the biggest problem with this move is they get a lot of play with king initiative still, which is strange. The idea here is that they can actually play moves like h5 or even rook g8. And I can't really defend correctly. Like, one thing that's a little scary to see is some sort of h5 happen, where if the h-file gets opened, it doesn't feel like it matters, but it actually kind of does. They can double up on the h-file and get some sort of initiative. And also rook g8. This is also completely reasonable too for them. a5, a4, b4. Rook a b1 would have to be played, and some sort of king e7. And black's totally fine here. And anytime I want to play f3, this just doesn't work. h5 comes, and the g-file opens up in a horrible way for me. So That's important to remember. But luckily, my opponent made a blunder in return. They played queen e7, and now um, they're not able to take on g4, and there's no problems on the g file anymore. They also can't castle yet either, so this is nice for us. And there's this really annoying move, bishop d5, and there's only one way to respond to the move too. It's queen d7 back. And since they have to play queen d7 back, well, now we can trade or just try to get it under great circumstances. I end up playing knight h2 here, and this is great for us because if they take, then we can take back, and if anything like this, we can go knight f6 check and then take, and the exchange in the corner is hanging. So they can't even take on g4. They played h5, and of course I obliged. I took, but I was happy to do so. And I won a pawn. So now I'm up a pawn, but the position is still like, there's a lot of potential initiative we can see on the g file if they can like somehow maneuver their rooks to the g file. Obviously I'm covering g8 once I move my bishop back. But if they can, and they can play something like f3, it's annoying because I can't really play g3 in return because of this bishop. So we see rook h7 with this idea in mind of rook g7. I played bishop d1 because my idea here is I was going to play bishop f3. And then I slowly changed my tune, rook g8, and then I played bishop e2, and I was going to play bishop f1. Because I was seeing after like bishop f3 that there could be some sort of like rook g3s. But then I realized after rook h to g7, I don't really have a choice. I can't play bishop f1 because of this rook g3 move. Which was really scaring me. Because if I play knight f3, they can just take it. And otherwise, if I play something like king h1, f2 is hanging. So this is a problem. And I can't play something like rook e2 because first off, d3 is hanging, but even if d3 wasn't, then moves like f3 can come. So I noticed some sort of like initiative forming still. So I played bishop f3, realizing I just kind of wasted a move. But that's okay. It happens. We see bishop b6. Now king f1, just to get out of the pin. So now if rook g3, I don't have to worry anymore. And then my opponent played b4. And then I noticed that there might be a variation here that works out for me in a very good way. And I was really excited about it. And white to move. Can we take the pawn on h5? I'll just ask that. So the answer is yes, we can. And the reason why is because if they take on g2, we have bishop g4 check. And after bishop g4 check, if they take it with the run of the rooks, then we're happy. Because let's just say this rook, because this keeps the threat of taking on f2. But it doesn't matter. We take on g4 with the knight, and now they have to play something sad like f3 here. And we're going to eventually wiggle out, which is nice to see. Also, what happened in the game doesn't work either, even though it's really close to working, but it barely doesn't. Bishop takes f2. If this worked, then we would be just straight up lost. This has to be losing. It just looks awful for white. Black has a ton of activity here. There's a lot to worry about. But luckily, bishop takes f2. There's bishop g4 check anyways. And the point is, rook takes g4, giving up an exchange, doesn't work. Because although to get their exchange back, we have knight f6 check. And we're winning the exchange anyways. And that's exactly what happened. King e6, knight takes g8. But there's something else important to evaluate here. First off, that they can't take on c3. But most importantly, what happens after bishop d2? So I realized, hey, I can actually move my knight on g8 because we're not losing the c3 pawn. So I played knight h6. They play f3, knight f5, just to improve the piece. Maybe knight g4 is better, but takes, b takes c3, and I can just take back because they can't take on c3 comfortably. I play rook c1, and this is a problem for them. I can now take on c3. If they move their bishop, I can take their knight. Maybe a semi-challenging try is knight d4, but this doesn't really look too challenging after this because we're just up a rook. Alright, so king d7 was played. And now I play c4 to defend the pawn. Because they're defending their knight, now they're actually threatening to take. So I defend the pawn. And then they play knight b4. And this is a little challenging. Because like even though we're up the exchange, they're getting a little bit of initiative. And it's really annoying to deal with. I start with rook d1. We see bishop f4. And then I play a5 or a3. Knight c2. I'm never scared of knight e3 or knight d4. I always just exchange. And then when it's just a rook versus bishop, this is much, much easier to win. But with the knight, it's a little tricky. And now I play a4 just to keep the pawn. King c6, king f3. And my idea here is I'm trying to push my h-pawn and just promote it. King c5. Rook b1. I want to prevent knight b4. Knight d4 or anything to get the d4 squared does not matter. I'm very happy to see something like this. Oh, this would be stupid. But if I play king e2, there's nothing to be sad about here. This is a very good position. And we should win this in short order. We'll play something like rook b7 to provoke this pawn forward. And when it does, we go rook b6 and the a pawn just falls. So okay, knight b4 was played. Rook b3 just to defend it laterally. And now their pieces are starting to get a little tangled, which is nice. Because now we're ready to start pushing our h-pawn if they're not careful. Here they play bishop g5. And after bishop g5, I was ready to play h4, but I saw another move that is actually really hard for them to deal with. And that's knight g7. Where I'm threatening knight e6 check, forcing them to go back, and this is just threatening to win material on the spot. Because, for example, knight e6 here would be mate. If they defend their knight somehow, it doesn't matter, knight e6 wins the bishop. So, unfortunately, after knight g7, they're losing either their knight or their bishop. Or they have to go into some trades, which is what this move does. After knight c2, knight e6 check, king c6, we now have rook b2. And we're threatening the knight and we're threatening the bishop. This forces a trade, which is great for us. They could try knight e3, but of course we take on g5, so we're not worried about that. Knight d4 was played. I took it. E takes, king g4. And the game is over. So bishop e3, h4, king c5. And after h5, my opponent ends up resigning here. Because it's a very simple plan to win. We're going to play king f5 to g6. Push the pawn. And it's going to promote. It's inevitable. We're going to win the bishop. And with the rook against these pawns are already stopped. So we don't really even have to worry there either. So that's good. Some notes about the game. I think the most important thing is practically, I probably didn't have to allow bishop g4. Generally, people always play h3 or usually c3 before bishop g4. Like one problem is if we play h3 here, we always have to worry about like knight a5, right? Which is a problem, and you know, that's never fun to deal with. So here, maybe instead of castling, what we could do is we could look at c3 here. And if d6, then we play h3, right? So instead of castling, we delay it for a few moves in order to make sure that both the bishop, the light square bishop, is kept, and bishop g4 is prevented with this h6 g5 idea. But there's also an argument to make that this h6 g5 isn't really too concerning. I think practically it is kind of challenging, but luckily things turned out well here. And the last big important thing to remember is this queen g4 was not really a great trying to trade here. It makes sense, but it's just not the right approach. And we can see that after a move like rook g8 because we can't play f3. If we could play f3, that's different. But even still, rook b8, king f1, and then some sort of like, well, again, a5 is a direct threat. Like a4 is a big deal we have to watch out for. We can't really play f3 without worrying about moves like h5, which is very annoying to deal with. So yeah, that's going to cover it for the game. Some, again, misunderstandings of how I played this. But other than that, other than this this queen g4 thing, I think the game wasn't so bad. But it's something that I wanted to keep in mind, and I think I got a lot better at over the year. This game was played in 2022. It's coming out in 2023. This was played, I believe, in August. But over the next few months, I feel like I was much better at avoiding queen trades when I should be avoiding them, which is nice to be able to say. So I'm really excited to show that progression to you all. But let's finish it off, and I'll see you guys next week with game number 3 of the Hamilton Summer Open. Have a good one, and well, see you then. Bye-bye.